Gonna run that pole saw for a little bit. I figured I need to give it a chance. Bought it, right? It's just been sitting and sitting and sitting because the PS250 that we got, the Oregon PS250, that thing there has been just awesome. Plus with the extended boom I can get a little further up. And plus it feels lighter even if it doesn't actually weigh lighter. It's just because of the weight distribution. It's a beautiful day out here. Now a few years back it kind of dawned on me I had done a goofy little video about what I call game changers, and those little tools that make things easier when you're out harvesting firewood as a farmer. Not as a pro, you know, not production stuff, just the part-time stuff that I do. And at the time I had mentioned chains, and let me tell you what, they most certainly are. The ones I had pointed to then were the ones on the big International tractor, but I got these just a week or so back, and 2 weeks now I guess, and they've been a game changer for that tractor. Prior to those chains I'd be out here with the Big 10, that big clumsy tractor. So, and then I had used the hooks. I've got a pile of these. The International usually has 3 on the back. This one here is not as heavy, so 1 or 2 hooks, you know, depending on how many or how heavy the trees are I want to pull. This goofy thing right here is a big game changer to me, because up until this point in time I had to pull the trailer with a drawbar, and that meant you had to be a little more exacting on how you back it up. But with that kind of twisted hook there, that loop, I can move the 3-point back and forth and rotate that around, and I just have to get in the vicinity of the trailer and I can pretty much move things around to drop that pin down. It's very, very, very handy. And plus, with the jack, what I'll do is I'll just lift up with the 3-point, then rotate the jack and then set it where I want. And then when I set the trailer down, I just pick up with the 3-point again, rotate the jack down, and set that down again. It just makes everything so much easier. But what else? What else was back then? I had said hatchet and wedges. I still use them. That might even be the same hatchet. I don't know. And I eat these things up every year. Have to get more. I like these yellow ones. They come from Forester. You know. Oh, that thing right there. Now I found that the cheaper ones, they break. The handle breaks off right here. The ones that are a little bit more expensive, they're made in Canada, I believe. Like one of these. These work pretty well. I like these. Still use them. What else? Cant hook. I need to refinish that handle some. It's getting swole up because of the wood. Boy, I use that thing a lot. Bag. Carry my tools. I still use these. This is a different one, of course. I wear them out. It's time for me to get another one. What? Good helmet. I got a different one of those now, so stuff has been evolving. I think the one game changer I had put in that video that's not here now was the 555 Husqvarna, and that was the auto tune. And I still think that they are. I mean, most people shouldn't be playing with these goofy saws like I'm playing with here, just too cantankerous, you know. I like them, and I do have a 572 and a few 562s and still a 555, so it's not like I've given up on the concept. It's just for fun and games. These are the saws I choose to run. Right now, this one right here, and I want to put some time on that one. I want to put a sticker on. And today I want to see if I can finish what I started yesterday. I brought that saw out and I put a couple of tanks through it, and you know, it was running better and better and better, and then all of a sudden it started running worse and worse and worse, and then it shut off and wouldn't restart. Right about the time I wanted to do cookies, one against the other, a full 50mm X-Torq versus that 48mm 365 based saw. And maybe I should put them on the back of the trailer and go through the differences. For those who are the first time viewers, of course there's not many, but there are a few. What I've done over the years is taken the premise that I want to test some of the parts out there, both OEM and aftermarket, to see if they're useful. And usually targeting either the sources or the model saws that are most likely for people to want to use. But this here is the next evolution of that concept. In the very beginning, I started out with the 372s and testing things like the Hudzel 52mm big bore cylinders and, you know, some of those parts. It had reasonable results. You can go back and see what happened to them. A lot of those saws still run. And then on to steel-based aftermarket parts, and that was really started because I had a logger friend who I was supporting had this tendency to run over his saws, and it got really expensive using OEM plastic. So right alongside testing the Hudzel top ends on the 372s, because it was a cool concept, was finding sources of steel plastic that I could help my friend use to make his tendencies less expensive. How's that for being nice? And that morphed into doing the puzzle saws, the 660s and all that, and I had a lot of fun with those. And those MS 660s turned out to be a success, you know, with a few tactical changes. They turned into a very, very useful saw, and some of them are still out there doing production work, and some of them sit on my shelf, and some of them I auctioned off, and I have no idea what happened to them and don't really want to know, you know, once they're out of my umbrella. And I'm kind of come back full circle, the 372s, after that foray into the kit saws and steel-based kit saws and, you know, things like that. The two places where I had a lot of interest right about the time I started the channel is right where I've ended up, and that is the 372s and old John threads. It's funny how you go back to your roots. Now, I'll let the videos about the old John threads speak for themselves. They have nothing to do with aftermarket parts or new saws or which is the fastest and cookie cutters and none of that crap. It's really just about enjoying the history and just tinkering with old machines. I just happen to like doing that. But what this is still that path of testing parts, and people watching the channel can see through my experience what happens when these parts are put into service. Now, I understand that's just a sample of one every time. It's just what happens when I put them in service, and you might get completely different results. And I fully embrace the fact that what I do is probably different than yours. But I think that we have a fairly good system at this point in time, in the sense that we have both professional loggers running them, myself, which is a hobbyist, and most of the hobby types are not going to put as much time on the saws as I do, much less what the testing program people do. You know what I'm saying? And my premise with the MS 660s and now back to these is if they survive the logging environment, not just a sample of one, but a series of them, just like we did with the 660s where there was 7 or 8 of them out at one time, you start getting trends, and that turned out to be true. The trends we found early on with those 660s actually translated in the trends that a lot of people saw. So we saw them early on, and then it was supported by online commentary by people finding the same things. It's just it got there quicker with the loggers versus the hobby types. Well, the same with the 372s. And right alongside of testing the aftermarket parts is me doing saw repair, and in particular dealing with the X-Torqs. I see a lot of them around here because I'm one of the people who work on them. Not that I asked to be, it's just since I do, they ended up on my doorstep, more so than steels, because there's a lot of people around here who do steel support, so they don't need people like me. But the Husqvarna people don't have as much support, therefore I end up picking up some of that slack. Does that make any sense? Good breaking point. And that's one of the reasons why we go back full circle to the 372s and the X-Torqs in particular. Now, a couple of the things that I've seen fail fairly frequently on the 372s are obviously plastic and things like tank handle because of crush damage, not because of any failure or lack of integrity in the design. It's just what happens with saws. So me testing like this Hudzel handle and some of the other aftermarket plastic is just a natural follow-on of trying to figure out how to make that inevitable skidder crushing event less expensive. But with the X-Torqs, I started running into bearing issues. They did their job and they made their money. Just where some saws, when they got to the end of their service life, it was the top end, the X-Torq seemed to take out the PTO bearing pockets in the cases. So the natural solution was either finding an aftermarket set of cases that would work or trying to repair the damaged X-Torq cases, and that turned out to be very expensive. I'm not going to get into it, but we did try. That's why I started looking at those cases in a more focused way, and that is to try to come up with a strategy that when you have a blown up X-Torq where it took out the bearing pockets, that a person could still use the rest of the parts, the handles and the plastic and all that, and for a little bit of elbow grease and not a lot of money, still come up with a good running saw. Well, there was a fork in the road, and one of the forks was to keep it X-Torq, and the other was to, while you're in there making all those changes, bring it back to original edition. And that's what I've done with these saws. So this is really the poster child for that concept of taking the bones of an X-Torq that was at the end of its service life and putting it back to service in a original edition configuration, taking the good parts out of the X-Torq and blending it with some aftermarket parts, and that's a wonderful saw right there. And I've got a bunch of videos of similar things. So again, this was starting from a blown up saw. That was the premise behind this saw right here, the junk pile saw before that, and a bunch of other saws in the prior videos. This one, on the other hand, is okay, you can get these clone saws for very, very cheap. They're not that expensive, and there's a lot of good stuff in them. And like with the 660s, where I started with the aftermarket parts and then worked my way to a better solution using, you know, either better aftermarket parts like Highway or some of the other brands, Meteor, and sometimes adding OEM parts, and then the summation was a saw that was ready to do real work, not just hobby saw, but actual work saws. And that was successful, so now I'm going there with the 372s. There's three variants of these. There's a G372, a G372XP, and then this is the G372XT from Holzfforma. I've had a sample of each, and the first one was the G372, and it turned out to be a useful saw, and it didn't take much to make that a useful saw, so I'll leave that for a later time. I pretty much gave up on the XP, and I'm focusing on the XT because it has the bigger filter and the bigger carburetor. So if I can make this set of parts work, either in as delivered form or by subbing in better either aftermarket or better OEM parts to make a good saw, isn't that the definition of win? And that would be along the lines of what we did back with the MS660. So that's the two tracks that I'm playing with. One, starting out with a blown up OEM saw, and either going back to original edition if it's an X-Torq or staying X-Torq. Those are the two variants of that path. And the other one is starting out with this saw and then trying to add content in the form of better parts to make it a useful saw. This one here has been a bit of a frustration, starting out with its original handle, which was the more squarish version, not this one. If it had this handle, it would still be on there. This is the one that comes from Hudzel if you order them direct. But these packaged saws, where they're pre-assembled, they're done by a different vendor, and they have a different handle. And in the early days of Hudzel, they sold those, and I didn't like them then. And then they upgraded to these, and these have actually turned out to be pretty good. I like these. And on this saw here, I just got to the point where I couldn't deal with that squarish handle that wasn't smooth and working properly, and I just put a junk pile OEM handle on there with a new fuel line and filter. And that's what you see right here. Along with the handle came the better anti-vibe springs, and that made a big difference as well. Big improvement for that saw. And in the last video I took this saw and I put a 2017 iteration of the X-Torq ignition OEM. And that's made a big difference. It actually makes a difference on the X-Torqs as well. Now, subset of that discussion is these cases. I have 5 of them in my experience set. This one here that came on the package saw, this one I bought all by itself, right? I had one set that was delivered that was so corroded that I couldn't use them, so I basically threw them out. I had a set that was delivered with the aftermarket crank. That thing didn't last a week with a highway 52 millimeter top end on it. It just pretty much came apart. So I rebuilt that one with new bearings and an OEM crank and put a 52 millimeter pop up, and that saw died after 6 months of very, very hard use. So I actually began to show some signs of usefulness. I mean, that was an extreme case, the higher compression, the higher RPMs, and the all-day usage, day in, day out. And then I got another set of cases along with this set, so I had 2, and built a saw that's gone out to another pro logger and this one to see whether or not those cases survive better than the first series that we have basically used up. You know, so I can start collecting empirical data to decide whether or not this is a viable approach of salvaging saws, or is it just something for the hobby types. And that's where we are. And these saws, this saw right here has got some time on it. Runs really well. I really enjoy it. You know, a scratch right there. And this one here doesn't have enough time to matter. This one does. This one's proven out to be pretty reliable to this point in time. That one, you can see in my videos, I've tried 3 times, now 4 times, and it died every time. Or I had to go bring it back and start doing some kind of a debug. So, I'm rambling. Let's get some cookie cuts in here. And then I'm going to do some more cleanup work. I got a lot of cleanup work to do on this log to get it right. But I really want to just get the cookies today for the video, and then I'll do the cleanup at a different point in time. Let's start out with the comparison of 48 millimeter build versus G372xt. Which one starts easier? So I'm just going to set the camera on the trailer. Well, just in case I didn't get it with the other camera, because it ran out of battery again, I'll make a few passes with this camera, set in that slot that I cut the log. this one stalled. That's not good. See if I can restart and get one more out of it. That ain't good. Here we go again. Died again. So I guess it's not that decomp plug at all. There's something else with that saw. You know, I smell rubber. When that thing gets warm, I actually smell rubber. So I'm going to have to go back and tear into that saw and figure out what the heck's going on with that. So I pulled this thing apart. I haven't had very good luck with it. I wanted to sort of see how things were inside. And the gaskets are like bubble gum. Kind of a weird kind of a deal. But I did find it's got like an O-ring style gasket for the side covers. That's good. Although this one here is dinged. I don't think that's the problem. So I just roughed out what I normally do with these things. And I lowered the bottom just a little bit and just radiused the bottoms of the transfers just a little bit. Just pretty much standard affair for these things. Gutted their intake boot, and man is it flexible. I'm afraid that it probably collapses or something. I wonder if that's the problem. And gutted this filter holder. It's one of them deals where it's a 0 minus 0 is equal to 0 because this damn thing just doesn't work as a saw. So I'm going to start having fun with it. And it's either going to buck up and get with the program or it's going to blow up, and either one you're going to see it on the video channel. The piston, I don't know what I'm looking at. It's almost like it's a casting and they didn't machine it properly, where I don't know if you can see the change in finish where you had the machining down to here, but the casting was a little bit too small on the bottom, so it didn't quite actually get cut. You know, I don't know if that's going to matter that much. It's just not something I expected to see. See how he gets to the bottom there, and where you got the machining, and then all of a sudden it stops. So, you know, why they did that, I've got no idea. The one thing I do notice though is that the straddle ports are about the same size as the stockers, where the one I had gotten from Farmer Tech was substantially smaller. This is yet again another cylinder vendor. And I got to tell you, as much as it's not running well, the look and feel of the cylinder is not bad, and I like that. So that's one good thing. If I hadn't have seen these, you know, this right here would have been in the scrap pile because I'm just sick of this stuff. But that's that made me take a second look, because now, you know, I see this thing as not bad quality and maybe worth trying a fourth or fifth chance to get this thing to run. Conversely, that boot is like bubblegum. It is so soft. I don't know how it's going to survive. I just don't know how it's going to do that. And things like these goofy carburetor screws, you know. You notice how it eats right into the plastic right here? It's just a lower quality material than what you'd expect on a stock saw for sure. It's actually lower quality than I've seen from other Pharmatech products. So, and since it doesn't run very well for very long, I don't have a whole lot to say about it positive just yet. But my whole premise was maybe starting with this one right here, we end up with a bigger carburetor, and it does, and maybe we can make that work in a build that has like an original edition top end, get the bigger carburetor. I was actually going to put this 50 millimeter on there, and relented to go back to this and give it another shot. I may live to regret it. Carburetor looks good. I gotta tell you, one thing I do like about the carburetor is, I'm not sure if the camera's going to show it, it's very, very, very much like the Walbro, and it's the same diameter. That's the second thing I saw that I liked. And so the combination of what I see in the carburetor and a couple little bits I'm seeing on the cylinder means I'm going to give it another shot. See if we can make this thing run. There may be some good stuff in here. I mean, the cases, at least they are dimensionally correct right there, so that's a plus. But I just can't get the saw to run, so we're going to start just doing freeform stuff until we figure out why. And worst case, I just put an OEM top end carburetor in it. It's possible it's the carburetor. I know it's not the ignition anymore.